Regular meeting of council Monday, January the 26th, 7 p.m. Looking for approval of the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Public participation of 1. He's all clear. Mayor's message. I do have a few items here. For those of us who will be away over the next few days for the LGLA, you're not going? Loho, you're not going? There is a tour of the Royal Bay School on the 29th. If either one of you are interested in participating in it, then let me know and I can let Joanne know or send you the contact information on that one. The other one is a thank you note here from Pacific Center Family Services and the Crime Reduction and Education Program, CRED, where we had made our $500 donation. It's a letter of thank you from Mitzi there on behalf of CRED, and just explaining again, the work that they do in that regard of gang-related violence and risks for youth. Rob, right up your alley here for Friday, January the 30th. We have been invited. It's an open and public event. It's not just council. Boys and Girls Club of Greater Victoria are having an open house. It is for us on West Shore. It's Friday, January the 30th from 10 until noon at the Whale Road West Shore Child and Youth Family Center. So anybody that's in the vicinity or who might want to pop by can. That won't be Councillor Day and myself because we will be busy at a CRD strategic planning session. And for that Royal Bay site tour, it's 5 o'clock on the Thursday. Yeah. So that's that in the way of notices and that sort of thing. Anybody else got anything that's come up along the way? Yes, no? Good. Adoption of the minutes. We're looking to adopt minutes from the regular meeting of council January the 12th.
Move adoption, Your Worship.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Receipt on a number of minutes. Finance and Admin Committee, September 15th. Heritage Commission, October 8th. Parks, Rec, Culture, November 17th. Planning and Land Use, November 18th. Protective Services, November 19th. And Transportation Public Infrastructure, September 3rd. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Correspondence requiring council direction. We were in receipt of a letter from Hudson Hope in regards to a information on the Site C dam project. So, council, your considerations on this? It does say it is a December 2nd deadline, so I'm not sure.
Move receipt.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Number 6, Planning and Land Use, 6.1.1, Development Variance Permit, DVP 14015 for 515 Langholme.
Thank you, Worship. At our meeting last week, the Director of Planning explained that the applicant is requesting to vary Section 2.1.06, subsection 2C of the Land Use Bylaw number 151, reducing the minimum allowable side rear yard setback requirements from 1 meter to 0.27 meters and 0.31 meters, respectively, for an accessory building. The applicant, who was in attendance, informed the committee that the previous structure was a shed that was there when the house was purchased, and over time, with the septic field in the backyard being replaced, the shed eventually began to sink as the ground settled and it began to fall apart. She then informed the committee that the new structure is on the same footprint as the old shed, and they also replaced the fence and put it back in line with the property line. So the new structure is actually a little bit further away from the property line than it was previously. When rebuilding the structure, it was built to match the house and fit in with the neighborhood. The applicant stated that she had no communications with the city prior to the construction, as she was not aware that a permit was needed, as she was just replacing a previous structure. The applicant stated that she had verbally spoken to the other neighbor, and they are totally fine with the improvement and the look of the structure and have no issue with the location. The committee was satisfied with her explanation and that there was no intent to skirt any of the city rules, but it was a simple error on her part not to get a permit. So it was recommended to council by committee, and I so move that development variance permit number DVP 14-015 be approved.
Conversation? Councillor Martin?
Thank you. I just have a general question towards staff, and I guess I just get confused at times when people are responsible to come in and get a permit and when they're not, and that, because I had thought I was replacing a deck on my house, and I was under the impression that as long as the square footage did not exceed the previous deck, it was okay for me to take down the old deck and then put the new deck in. But is that incorrect, that I should have come? No, I think, well, I came in anyways to ask, but I mean, I thought that wasn't a requirement, like a permit. So I guess I get confused between that and versus like a shed and those type of requirements. Just looking for a clarification.
Yeah, it does depend on a lot of things. If you were changing a deck and you're also changing the stairway, and the stairway is part of a required egress from a building, then yeah, the building inspector would have to check it out. So it can get complicated on the margins like that. If you weren't changing anything about it, but just simply resurfacing everything exactly as it was, then you shouldn't need a permit, in my view.
So just help me then understand. So this person, it sounds like they were replacing a shed that was exactly the same size as the previous shed, but they do need a permit? And is that because it's an external building, or?
Any shed over a certain size requires a building permit.
Oh, it's the size of the shed.
Yeah, and it's because any building that you can go into requires a permit. But
okay,
in this case, is development permit we're talking about, are we? Rather than a building permit, or you
right?
talking about both
Yes,
permits?
and maybe I could get clarification on that as well. I guess if it's a development permit, because if it's a shed that already exists.
So there's two permits here. One building permit because the shed was over the 10 square meters floor area that triggers a building permit. And secondly, and this is why it's before council, is the fact that the shed was built within the setbacks, okay? And that necessitates a development variance permit. There is a situation where you can grandparent existing structures, but that's only in cases where there was and it's within the Local Government Act, that no more than 20% of the structure above the foundation was removed, and you have to prove that it was say in this case a shed that was legal at one time, and it had to be there for not less than 6 months at any one time. So,
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. 6.1.2 Development Variance Permit DVP 14-018 for 3111 Woodpark Drive.
Thank you, Worship. Again, at our meeting last week, the Director of Planning explained that the applicant is requesting to vary Section 5.6.06, subsection 2 of the Land Use Bylaw, number 151, reducing the combined side yard setback requirement from 4.5 meters to 3.5 meters, respectively, to facilitate the construction of a building addition and garage enclosure to the north side of the existing one-family dwelling. He then stated the proposed setback for the north side yard is approximately 1.7 meters. The existing south side yard is 1.8 meters. The applicant, who will be soon to be new residents to Colwood, his wife have 3 young children, and the property that they had purchased has a carport that is a little bit too narrow to open doors and fit car seats in, standard challenges that parents have with minivans, etc. So what they're hoping to do is widen the structure by 3 feet and expand the house to make a 4th bedroom. The northern neighbor is the one who will be the most affected by the expansion, and that the applicant has spoken with them, and they've had no problem with the addition and have submitted a letter of support. I believe the city also received a second letter of support from a neighbor across the street who has no objection to the variance. So it was recommended by committee, and I so move that development variance permit number DVP-14-018 be authorized for the issuance which would have the effect of varying combined allowable side yard setback requirements pursuant to section 5.6.06 subsection 3 of the land use bylaw number 151 from 4.5 meters to 3.5 meters on the property described as lot 11 section 68 Esquimalt District Plan 19926 or 3111 Woodpark Drive.
Seconder? Discussion, council? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. 6.2, finance and admin. 6.2.1, regarding public library 2015 budget request. I know, Councillor Martin, you sit on library, and Councillor Trace, you're on finance. So how are we dealing with this one?
Thank you. Thanks. Basically, what this is, just as a clarification, the Juan de Fuca Library building had a mortgage on it that was held by the CRD. In 2013, that mortgage was paid off, and that mortgage was basically $80,880 per year, and the 22% share of that was coming from Colwood, which was about $18,000. The library wants to create a reserve fund and basically take that $18,000 roughly that we were applying to the mortgage that we no longer have to apply and put it into a reserve fund to help pay for repairs of the building and the long-term replacement of that building as it ages. I think it's close to 20 years old now. So, but they do need permission from each of the municipalities, hence the reason it's here tonight. And I'm happy to make the motion, that the request from the Greater Victoria Public Library for an $18,486 contribution from the City of Colwood for projects funded from the major assets maintenance be approved by council.
Seconder for discussion? Second. Council for discussion. Let's have discussion before any motions get made. Go ahead, Councillor Nault.
I really feel that the proper time for this would be when we are discussing the library budget as a whole, because right now, council has no way of knowing how big the library requisition is how much it's going to increase by. So this $18,000 approval, I think, is premature. We should be looking at it, I believe, when the budget is before us for approval.
Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Worship. Just a point of clarification, this isn't requesting any new money. It's just seeking authorization to spend money that's in the reserve fund already?
Making a reserve.
Or making a reserve, but being able to spend, but it's not requisitioning any new funds, right?
Yeah, may I answer?
Yeah, no, because you're on the same line as my question, so.
Yeah. So basically what it is if you think of, we were paying, it was built into the core library budget of us having to pay the mortgage every year of that $18,000. That mortgage is now paid off, and so we would actually normally see a reduction of $18,000 on our requisition because we no longer have to pay the mortgage. What the library is saying, though, is that it's prudent, which I agree with them, because it's less painful, that you just continue to collect the same amount, put it into a reserve, and then that helps us maintain and then eventually replace that building as it continues to age. So this is basically being a proactive demonstration of protecting our assets from a library standpoint.
Councillor Nault.
Again, I agree wholeheartedly that it is a responsible thing to do, and we won't see an immediate increase. But the other shoe is, what is the increase in the rest of the operating budget going to be, and how big an impact is that going to have on our bottom line at tax time? I would prefer to discuss this all with the entire library budget in front of me, so I know where that $18,000 falls in relationship to the other $730,000 that we devote to the library.
And Councillor Martin, are you aware of the reasoning behind a January 31st timeframe?
Yes. What happens is for the library budget to be complete, and Andrea can correct me if I'm wrong, or our Director of Finance, excuse me, for the library is required to provide our complete past budget back to the municipality so that they can incorporate that into their budget discussions. And so that has to be finalized. So what happens is we need to have an answer before January 31st because the second Tuesday of February is when the board passes the library budget. And so if we do not have an answer by January 31st, then that means we can't build it into the budget, which means it doesn't happen this year.
Are you aware of what they may have been doing in the past or up to date now in regards to a reserve fund in any way, shape, or form to deal with this?
Well, yeah, you have to keep in mind each municipality is responsible for their own buildings. So, for example, Saanich took a huge hit when they moved Emily Carr from their old building to the new one at Uptown Center, and it was completely the responsibility of Saanich to pick up that cost. So they ended up having to build that into their budget, which was over $1 million. I think this is prudent in that we're actually protecting Colwood taxpayers long term because we're putting that money away now that if we end up having to do something down the road, we have that reserve fund. Also, please keep in mind there is one library in Langford right now, which Langford is responsible for wholly, and they're building a second library at the Y, which Langford will be completely responsible for because it's just theirs. And who knows down the road if they choose that they would like to withdraw out of the Juan de Fuca library, so which would end up putting stresses on the rest of the municipalities that are in the Juan de Fuca library. So just keep that in mind as well.
Many things to consider. Is there just one question to staff, first of all? Andrew, is there any way to deal with this? I mean, you know, I look at it and you know, in principle, it sounds wonderful, and I'm not hearing any objection to the idea of being proactive, but, you know, the matter of fact is we haven't got that into our budget discussions.
Yeah, so basically it is a little bit confusing, and I do appreciate Councillor Martin's explanation because I didn't know the history. But basically we pay now or we pay later. So what this is trying to do is smooth our maintenance costs. And it's actually very wise what they're doing. They're setting it up so that it's an even amount of money every year. Otherwise, one year it might be $150,000 and another year we don't know what. So we did get details that came forward to our FAC committee meeting here a couple of weeks ago, and we did review that, and they actually had laid out in great detail the maintenance items that needed to be replaced. And to give them full marks, they did it over a 10-year period versus 5. So they did a really good long-term analysis of the needs of the library. So I was quite comfortable with it, and FAC has recommended it because up until now, we do get charged for maintenance, and we never know what it's going to be. Okay?
Good. Councillor Day?
Thanks. I seem to recall a discussion around this last year, and when I read the item, I was expecting that they were seeking our authority to spend monies that we've put aside in the fund. Because, of course, in 2014 we should have had the money as well, being as it was paid off in 2013. So my understanding, and when I read carefully again, reread the wording of the motion, I'm a little confused whether they're just putting this money aside in a capital replacement fund or if they're actually replacing some capital and seeking authority to spend the money.
I'm hoping Councillor Martin can answer that.
Yes. My understanding of the situation was last year we were in a situation where we weren't sure who was legally allowed to hold on to the money. We didn't know if we had to designate it to a city so that it sat in a city reserve fund, or if the library actually had the legitimate legality to actually have a reserve fund itself and hold it on behalf of the 5 municipalities that pay into Juan de Fuca. They have got a an opinion now that says, yes, they can hold it and that they will control it. But anytime money does get spent, it does need to come back to each of the municipalities to be okayed to be spent out of that reserve fund. But what this is, my understanding of this is saying, we now know that we can, we're going to do it, and your portion will be $18,000 a year if you approve it.
Question back to staff. If this is going to be an ongoing thing, is this then going to become part of the 5-year overall?
Part of the 5-year library budget?
Yeah.
As far as I know, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Any others for comments, questions?
Just one question. So I guess now that we've paid the mortgage and this is kind of a surplus for maintenance, if another area were to get tight, does Colwood have the right to take some of the money back out of the reserve?
That's a great question. No, once it's into the library fund, it would be designated for the maintenance of the library classification of Wanda Fuca.
Anybody else? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on then to item 6.2.2 regarding the 2015 through 19 5-year financial plan preparation timeline. Councillor Trace?
Attached is a memo for the 5-year financial plan preparation timeline. At the FAC meeting of January 13, the finance staff addressed this, the dates presented by the Director of Finance, and it's here for approval from Council.
We're just receiving.
I believe it's just for receipt, if I may.
Yeah, receiving
Yeah,
for
just for receipt.
timelines on.
Yeah.
And if anybody has any questions around the timelines or of our finance director, then now will be it.
Move to receive.
Second.
And I just want to say, Andrea, what a very aggressive timeline in here, and I know that we have some challenges ahead of us. So I'm sure that I speak on behalf of council if there's anything that we can do to support, and or if it does get into requiring extra meetings, that we will do our most to participate and get together to make sure that we can meet this line.
Thank you. And if I may add a comment, I've had a look at previous year's timelines, and then I went back and I actually matched up the meeting minutes with the timelines, and I discovered that actually the budget process didn't take place over the 6 to 8 months that some of the timelines projected, because to be honest, staff do not have the capacity to have that many budget meetings right now. And my thinking was that if we really focus on this, we can get it done in a shorter time period, because I know this is a bad quote on my part, but the more meetings we have, it doesn't generate more money. So we will have some challenges with our budget this year in terms of matching revenues and expenditures. So it will be, I hope, not a line-by-line item. And I'm going to start, I've made that really clear in here with the big buck items, with our tangible capital assets and our special projects, and we'll go down from there. And there'll be times if you've got questions, I'll say, well, come on by my office, and if you've got specific questions, because we just aren't going to have the resources or the time to do that line by line and meet our deadlines on this.
Great. So we have a motion to receive. Seconder? Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Excuse me, our Director of Admin has just pointed out this is probably the appropriate time for me to get agreement on the start time on the meetings.
Oh, okay.
And so, for instance, we're going to be having 2 very intense meetings on February the 16th and the 18th. And I've gotten question marks early start there, because I don't know if council has to agree. We're sort of thinking about dinner between 5 and 5:30 with a start time of 5:30.
Council, is there any objections? Is there a timing issue with any of you that have other jobs to report to and from, or can you manage, do you feel, mid-February? School?
There's no time conflict, but Parks, Rec, and Culture meeting is supposed to be on the 16th. I got emails going to be moved to the 18th, but we also have a budget meeting on the 18th. So I'm just wondering how that would fit.
Basically, we will be bumping a couple of those committee meetings. I did spend a lot of time with the calendar because it was very hard to accommodate all the different dates and not run up against council meetings as well. So there is the odd committee meeting we will be bumping. And the FAC meetings, basically, I've timed those to be budget meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, what's preference, folks? 5 o'clock start, 5:30 start? What do you see being able so that staff can plan? Yeah.
The 16th is fine. I'm coming from a CREST meeting on the 18th, so you might have to start it.
Start. I mean, I'm all for, minimizing the gap between the day and tightening things up. So if 5 o'clock start.
Okay,
works.
if you could manage that. I did notice when I reviewed previous year's minutes, sometimes the meetings were going well past 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you folks, but that's not always good decision-making time. Everyone's tired, so I thought if we could get going a little bit earlier.
5 o'clock and
Yeah.
happy tummies, and we should be all good.
That's right. If you feed me, I'll be okay.
So 5 o'clock then is good. Thank you, folks. Oops, just about jumped right over you, Rob. Memorandum, Councillor Rob Martin, new item, request to send letter to Minister of Education to ask for increased fundings to support community public libraries. Councillor Martin?
Thank you. I hope everybody saw it's pretty self-explanatory. I guess I'm actually very, very passionate about libraries. I've never heard somebody say, "Oh, that's a real problem area. It's got too many libraries." The libraries create a wonderful community atmosphere, and unfortunately, the stresses have continually to be downloaded from the province down to the municipalities to pick up the costs. The City of Langford did send a letter that you see on page 2 of 2, and that I am in full support of us sending something very similar to the province, just asking that they continue to consider sending or increasing funding back to the libraries across the province.
You're making the motion?
And I will make that motion.
Seconder, please. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item is into Transportation Public Infrastructure, 6.3, request to allow placed fence to remain on city property at 3393 Fulton Road. TPI?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We received a request from a property at 3393 Fulton Road. The resident had constructed a fence on city right-of-way, not on the property line. On review, the committee recommended to council that the fence should be moved back to the property line, and there were several reasons for this. Potential liability was one. If the city had to do maintenance on the right-of-way, it might entail them destroying the fence. And the final one was that by setting a fence line that far forward, it might encourage the neighbors to set fence lines that's a similar encroachment on city property. So the committee recommended to council, and I would so move that the city deny the request to allow the fence to remain on city property and request it to be removed or replaced back along the property line at 3393 Fulton Road, but allow minor landscaping and gravel to be placed on the city property by way of an approved right-of-way permit. So I would so move that.
Second.
Discussion, council? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. That concludes our regular meeting, and we will be looking to move in camera.
So, second.